Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to DEI After 5. This is a conversation, and I know I always say this, I'm always looking forward to all of these conversations, but this is one that I think is really critical to the livelihoods and the lives and how we work as DEI practitioners. You know, I often talk about self-care and wellness, and we've had guests talk about burnout before. And so I wanted to bring that topic back up because lately I've been seeing and hearing lots of practitioners talking about being burnt out or feeling burnt out again. We're about to hit, that time of year where everything seems to just be in fast forward. And so how do we do that? How do we manage burnout? But then also we're empathetic people. And so how do we take care of ourselves while we're taking care of others? And so my guest today is Marv Curtis, who is a burnout coach and specialist in all things around this work. And so I wanted to welcome my guest today. So welcome, Marv. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. So Marv, first of all, tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how you got into doing this type of work.
Thank you. So in my career, I've spent a lot of time in business. I have an MBA and I've owned and operated a number of call centers, been in a variety of sales-oriented businesses, insurance, mortgage, customer service, those sorts of things. And over the course of that time, I've had a number of situations where employees would go into a meltdown. They'd go into panic, one thing or another. And in addition, I've had those experiences in my own family. I had a child who had open heart surgery as a very small child and was what we would call hypervigilant. And when he got to be a teenager, he began to experience severe panic attacks. So as just a method of, I couldn't find anyone else to help do this, I had to learn how to help people manage through those kind of emotional crises. And, in some contexts, that's called burnout. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's professional. But in the course of doing that and being trained ultimately as a clinical hypnotherapist and a variety of other techniques, what I found is that many of the people who experience issues like burnout tend to be more sensitive than other people. And as I looked around, I found that many of my clients were what we would call highly sensitive, highly empathic. And then I realized, I'm that way. My wife was that way. My mother was that way. I have children and grandchildren who are that way. And what I came to learn is that about 20% of the population have highly sensitive neurologies and make us both more susceptible to overwhelm and overstimulation, but also we experience life a little bit more fully. And my guess is that you probably fit somewhat into that category too.
As you're speaking, I'm just like, yep, that's me. And I actually dealt with panic attacks and anxiety, in high school and into college. And so I totally relate to that because now that I think back on it and how I've been able to manage it, it has been like, how do I control, not necessarily control, or be a little bit more mindful of the environment around me and what causes me to get into those modes. I want you to talk a little bit about, you mentioned hypnotherapy. Is that what we normally think about in this work, like the hypnosis? Talk to us a little bit about that and how that ties in to burnout.
Sure. So when I work with clients as a coach, I'm not really doing what you think of as a traditional hypnotherapy, where you have the clock going back and forth and you go into a deep trance. But what I am doing is I'm helping you recognize these two different states that we all experience, one being your logical thinking state and your more emotional body state. So if you think of this from more of a scientific standpoint, biologists would tell us that we have three brains. You've got the brain that's in your head. You've got a brain that's in your heart. Obviously, it's not the brain that's in your head, but you have kind of a brain in your heart and one in your gut. And if we just combine the heart and the gut brain and say that's your body or your emotional brain, a lot of the people that I deal with have a conflict between the logical conclusions that they've drawn and the emotional values or beliefs that they hold. And that's what most of what I do is I help people connect those two things and bring them together. And so when you're talking to people's emotions, that's what some people would call hypnotherapy.
I think you just outlined one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of DEI practitioners struggle with, in that logically we know where the organization is going, we know the goals of the organization, we know what we're trying to accomplish, but sometimes our gut, our emotion, our own lived experience, it doesn't align. And so that's part of that challenge that so many people are facing. I know that I dealt with that when I was, in-house working within organizations where even prior to doing diversity and inclusion work, when I worked in higher education, I would be told one thing and in my gut, I just could not get past, this is what my body is telling me. Like, this doesn't feel right. This is not what I want to say or not what I want to do, which would then ultimately cause me stress.
Well, you have identified really the core of most emotional problems, and it starts up here. So you said, as DEI practitioners, you have a sense of the logical structure of the business that is separate from the judgments and conclusions and stories you tell about those logical issues. That's where the trouble gets really real. Because, if you think of, let's just talk Buddhism for a minute. A Buddhist leader once said there's two kinds of pain. The first is the actual painful experience. And the second is the stories that we tell ourselves about the pain. And sometimes this is where most of the pain resides. The same thing is true of the logical conclusions we draw about life. And unwinding those goes a long way to helping people find peace.
I'm pausing because I'm just thinking through everything you just dropped on me. It explains so much of my life right now, and kind of what, especially in this work, so many of us have been grappling with, and I cannot tell you the number of times that I've had coaching clients that are practitioners that the first question out of their mouth is, am I even supposed to be doing this work?
Yeah.
Right. They question themselves because, again, there's that misalignment between what they know, the stories they hear, the stories they tell themselves, and, what they're experiencing.
Do you find that they are able to be in touch with that part that they're trying to make resonant or not?
That's a really great question. Sometimes I think so. But oftentimes I think the logical brain supersedes the emotion, supersedes the gut, which in the moment may feel like there's some resolution, but it ultimately comes back to, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, when it doesn't feel right, sooner or later, that's going to come back until it feels right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I do, and it's kind of a first step, in the beginning, you mentioned highly sensitive and highly empathic people tend to absorb the energy of other people. And sometimes we hang on to that energy, and that causes us a lot of problems. And we're acting out of someone else's energy instead of our own. So one of the first things I try and do is help people learn to recognize that energy. And I do that by teaching them how to talk to their intuition. So when we talk about how do you communicate emotionally with yourself, because, we're incredibly brilliant,
Right.
especially at an emotional level. If you can engage your heart brain and your gut brain, you know the answers to a lot of the questions in your life. You just may not have access to them, or you're favoring your logical conclusions instead of those. So one of the first things that I like to do is help people learn how to get a really solid, good answer from their intuition whenever they want.
And what does that look like? Because I'm sitting here and as you're talking, I'm thinking about, and coaching is about, powerful questions and asking the right questions. But this seems to take it almost a little step further. It's not just asking the questions, but it's having the client ask themselves those questions.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And by doing that, you're helping the client to solve their own problem. Because,
Yeah.
as we all know, I may tell you a lot of things, but the truest words that you hear are the ones that come out of your own mouth, not mine.
Absolutely.
So let me give you an example. And this is, everybody's gone through this. You
Okay.
probably took some kind of a standardized test. If you're going to college, you probably took an ACT or an SAT or one of those kinds of tests. And when you're in those tests, they frequently say to you, go with your first answer. And what we usually do is we hear the first answer and then we hear our logical brain rationalize why that's not the right answer. So when I'm teaching people how to trust and how to listen to their intuition, I say to them, when you ask yourself a question, you ask your intuition or your body, you're going to get two answers almost automatically. The first will be instantaneous, and in most cases, it will just be a sense of knowing. That's your intuition. And oftentimes you miss it because really quickly your brain comes in and gives you a logical rationalization. And so what I'm going to say to you is pay really close attention to that first answer you get. That's your intuition answer. Now, the second part is ask a binary question, yes or no. If you ask a complicated question like, should I be in this job, or should I become a doctor, or should I become an attorney, or should I, you give it multiple choice questions, hard to get an answer. But if you ask a yes or no answer, almost always you're going to get a highly resonant feeling. That's the first place I start. So let's just take you for an example.
Oh, gosh.
If I were coaching you, and let's say you were experiencing some overwhelm, or you've had just too much sensory stimulation, I would say to you, ask your body, code for your intuition, yes or no, am I holding anyone else's energy right now? And in most cases, you're going to get a yes or a no answer. That's the first step of the diagnosis of what are we going to do to release that energy so that you can act out of your own knowledge.
What I love about that question is it asks about your environment without asking around about your environment. In that, are you holding anyone else's energy, right? Who is impacting you? What voices are others are you hearing that's impacting how you are going to respond to this?
What's interesting here is when I'm dealing with highly sensitive people, just almost without fault, they immediately connect and can hear the answer. When I'm dealing with people who are not highly sensitive, it's more of a struggle. They're so top of mind, so logical, that although everyone has that intuition and can hear it, it's much more difficult for a non-sensitive to hear that and be able to respond to it. So that's one of the cues or keys to whether you have a more highly sensitive neurology.
Right. Because as soon as you asked that question, I was just like, yes.
So let's just follow this.
Question, like the answer, yes.
Let's follow the process. So I would say, ask your body yes or no. Do you know whose energy you're holding?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
Yeah.
you do. So
Yeah.
right there in this very short interchange, we've gotten further in helping you along the process of understanding how you're feeling than you would have spent hours in telling your stories, because that's
Right.
what most therapy is. You just tell your stories over and over again. What we're doing is we're connecting you to your own knowing and just giving you some guidelines. So let's go to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just check, because sometimes it's more than one. Ask your body yes or no. Are you holding more than one other person's energy?
Right.
And if you are, then we're going to have to go through the process one by one. It's hard to do
Yeah.
it in multiples. So the next step would be, let's say that you're only holding one. That'll make it easy for us. Is there a message in that energy that you should be receiving?
Mm.
Not asking what the message is, but if I
Right.
ask, is there a message? And there isn't always a message. Sometimes somebody's just dumped energy on you.
Yeah.
But if there is one, almost invariably, you'll just have immediately a deep sense of knowing, yeah, this is the message.
It reminds me of the inner critic work that is often done in coaching, right? And
Yeah.
I do an exercise with some of my clients around like name your inner critic. And it's a similar thing, because it's like once they name it and they know the purpose of that inner critic, then it's easier to put that inner critic in its place.
Name it to tame it.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm loving this. I'm loving this. I'm loving this.
All
So
right, so let's go to the next step.
Okay.
Since we're kind of following this progression.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, and I'm going to digress here for just a minute to bring out why we might do this. People may come and say, I'm just feeling out of balance. I'm feeling like I'm not grounded. I'm confused. I'm mad. You've got all these swirling energies out there and you can't get back to baseline. How do you self-care? So what I'm teaching you is a process to get you to self-care. So I'm next going to say, let's assume you've had one energy in there. There was a message. You know what the message is. And if you hadn't, I'd say, ask your body if it can make known to you what that message is. So you do. Let's say we're there. Now ask your body, is it okay to release that energy and send it back to where it came from?
Yeah.
And
that's so powerful.
So once again, one of two things is going to happen most of the time, and the easiest is, yes, I can release the energy. But sometimes the answer will be no, I can't release this energy. And in those cases, it is usually connected to and triggering a memory of a previous experience that you've had in your life. And that's when we say, we need to go release the energy from this traumatic experience. When I say traumatic, I'm not talking car crash.
Right.
It could be just something that's stuck inside of you.
Yeah.
We release that separately. But then we come back. And so let's say it says, yes, you can release that energy. I might then, just as a matter of testing, ask your body if it will release that energy to the count of 10. Most of the time it comes back and just says 10. So then I go into an eco meditation pose. So this is basically a combination of EMDR and EFT. I'm going to have you use the butterfly hole. You're going to alternately tap on these acupressure points on your upper arms. You're going to breathe deeply to the count of 10 as the energy releases. 10, 9, and you're just going to breathe it through. That gives you bilateral stimulation, which automatically balances you, helps self-regulate. The deep breathing takes you out of beta and more into alpha. And your brain just knows we're releasing that energy. And when you come out of this, you're a different person.
Even with that few seconds of me listening and just doing this,
yeah,
I can sense the.
You feel different.
Yeah, it's like, whew.
So let me give you just, this is an evidence-based technique. So this has been tested to determine, does it move you from beta to alpha? Does it reduce your cortisol levels? Does it reduce anxiety, stress? And in clinical studies, this kind of sometimes it's not this tapping, sometimes it's more of an EFT tapping, but
Right.
basically an acupressure point tapping has been proven to measurably reduce stress and anxiety, and help you regain balance.
It's interesting because I was talking to someone recently about tapping and just that whole the work behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that was very new to me, and as someone that has always dealt with high levels of cortisol, stress, anxiety in earlier times of my life, I'm surprised that I'm just now hearing about or learning about tapping. And the few times that I've done it, I'm like, where has this been? Like my entire life, it would have saved so much time and energy. So, as I'm thinking through this, and again, there are going to be so many folks that watch this or listen to this. What are some techniques that they can do kind of in the moment? Like tapping, you mentioned, the bilateral that you mentioned. Is there anything else that they can do kind of in the moment if they're feeling high levels of anxiety or stress?
So the process that I go through, I mean, there are many others, but I'm going to just tell you this is the process that I go through when I'm helping somebody out of it. And the beauty of this is you can do it to yourself.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're really stuck and you need a coach to walk you through it because you're just too dysregulated to think clearly. But the first thing I want to know is what we started with. Are you holding someone else's energy?
Yeah.
Because, and I've had this experience, I will treat the symptom and have a great effect. And then 15 minutes later, they're right back where they were
Yeah.
because I'm treating someone else's energy.
Yeah.
Or I'm treating a symptom and not the real thing. So I've got to get you to baseline energy. So first step is, are you holding anyone's energy? And to do that, I've got to get you to learn how to talk to your body and get an intuitive response. So first step is, are you holding anyone else's energy? And then release that. And when we release it and we do it this way and the deep breathing, we're also rebalancing everything else at the same time. So it's a very simple process. That alone will take you from crazy to ground zero in short time. Normally, when I have clients who've really been struggling with this, I'll say you need to get on a schedule, get a timer or an alarm clock. Just do this 15 minutes every day in the morning and get you so that when you start the day, it's just your energy, you are balanced, your brain is working on both sides, everything's firing normally. It'll change your life. Literally, it will change your life.
I mean, I honestly think that once people hear this and start to put this into practice, right, this could be part of their regular self-care routines. I often say that self-care looks different for everyone. And so this may resonate with some folks and may not with others. But I think that this is a beautiful practice to try. Like now that you said that, and I always, tell people it only takes 10, 15 minutes out of your day to really focus on your self-care. This is something that I think I want to add to my, practice because, I have found my challenge is falling asleep at night because my brain is going a million times an hour. And so having that moment to just release energy, to get grounded in a way,
Yeah.
and help, again, bring down those cortisol levels and aid in just having more restful sleep and rest in time kind of in that space.
You've raised an important question. That is racing minds. So people who have highly sensitive neurologies are ruminators. We tend to think about problems over and over again. We go back to the past. We want to relive the past. We want to rework that. Could I have done this differently? So there's a part to this grounding exercise that's really powerful, and it brings into play mindfulness. So mindfulness, well understood, very powerful. But for those of us who are highly sensitive, who are ruminators, deep thinkers and deep feelers, our brains just take off.
Yeah.
So while you're doing this, if you'll add this component, it's incredibly powerful. Now, I don't know why this works, and it may just be metaphorical, but it really is powerful. And what you do is as you breathe in, so we're going to do 6-second breathing. So I'm breathing in to the count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As I do that, I visualize I'm bringing in healing energy with my in breath. And then whatever thoughts are going, just let them pass through your mind. I'm focusing on a visual energy, positive, compassionate energy coming into me. And with my out breath, I'm sending that energy to whatever part of my body, mind, or spirit is ailing. Let's say I've got a migraine. I'm going to send it to my migraine. I've got arthritis. I'm going to send it to my arthritis. And I'm going to do that until I feel some relief, because you will feel some relief. Now, what do? Then I send it to my clients. I send it to my children. I send it to my grandchildren. I may send it to those energy vampires who dump their negative energy on me every day. And I know going into work, we're going to try and do it again. And I'm going to forget to say no. And I'm going to be a people pleaser and get back into this situation. I'm going to send that energy both to the part of me that needs to be able to say no, and I'm going to send it to them, basically to create a barrier between their negative energy and me.
Marv, I could talk to you all day about this stuff. I love it. It's so powerful. And I think it's needed because, again, as practitioners, as DEI practitioners, we advocate for others so much. And we're often also advocating for ourselves, but we forget ourselves in that process.
And do you find that you put others first and yourself last?
Absolutely.
It's part of the trait.
Absolutely.
You've got to learn how, and this is a great way to do it, to put yourself first.
Absolutely. So, Marv, the last question I'm going to ask you, and you spoke about it a little bit, but we're going to take it out of kind of this realm, is, how do you fill your cup? When you're not coaching, what do you do to take care of yourself?
Well, this morning I went and fished for 2 hours on the Madison River in Yellowstone National Park.
Nice.
Being in water, in nature, it's really grounding for me. I also do a lot of handcrafting. So I make wood products out of scrap, found wood in the forest, bolo ties, necklaces, bracelets. Just working with my hands and working with wood, deeply grounding for me.
Oh my goodness. And I heard recently that there's a whole area of work called earthing, where it is about getting back to nature and touching nature and natural things with our hands and our feet. So it just seems like it ties right back into the work that you do.
For me, that really works. It doesn't work for everybody. Everybody is different. But yes, earthing really works for me.
Yeah. I think it, I realized that it worked for me as a child. And now as an adult, I'm trying to get back to it.
Nice.
So it's something that I appreciate. So Marv, thank you so much for joining us today. I've taken over a page of notes and just, wanting to capture this because I think it's so important. And it's something, again, that I advocate for anyone that is in the type of role where they are dealing with empathy and dealing with people and holding on to a lot of negative energy oftentimes. So thank you so much. How could people get in contact with you if they wanted to follow up with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn at Marv Curtis Coaching or Marv Curtis. I have a website, which is marvcurtiscoaching.com. And my email is marv@marvcurtiscoaching.com. So you can message me if you want to just chat by messaging on LinkedIn. I also have a Facebook page, but that's not terribly active. But LinkedIn is a great place to connect, or there's a contact form on my web page. You can set up an appointment for a phone call if you'd like to do that.
Thank you so much, Marv, for being with us today. And thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope that you were able to take away a couple of nuggets here. I know I have more than a couple of nuggets that I took away from this. And so thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Excuse me, to our YouTube channel and to find us where you find your podcast. All right. Until next time, have a good one.